Small business has been and always will be the backbone of our economy. The retelling of the American dream is all about entrepreneurship, hard work, and sacrifice. Today, nearly 45% of small businesses are closed in Michigan. While corporate America is experiencing some success working remotely, according to a recent study by the Small Business Association of Michigan, a group with more than 28,000 members statewide, more than 50% of small business owners do not have the ability for their employees to work from home. 72% of those surveyed businesses have applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, and 43% have applied for other loans or advances. It's clear, COVID-19 has impacted small business more than any other sector in our country. Are federal grant dollars available for small business owners outside of the PPP? Who might be eligible for that, and who understands the forgiveness component? Today, our extraordinary panel of experts will help us look into the future as we shift our focus this week on all things small business. Up first, an important briefing from Brian Calley, president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. We'll then hear from John Bailey, a visiting fellow from the American Enterprise Institute, the leading expert in America on opportunity zones, opportunity funds, and federal grant dollars available. And finally, our powerhouse panel of experts includes partner at Plante Moran, Laura Claeys, and chef Bobby Nara of Encore Catering for their perspectives on PPP and all things small business. If you'd like to add a question to the discussion, please do so in the chat box, and I'll do my very best to incorporate it. It's Wednesday, May 27th, 2020. I'm Derek Dickow, and this is Impact. This series is free to you thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, and Impact on Small Business is proudly presented by Signal Restoration Services, a company dedicated to helping you restore your business or property any size, anywhere in North America. Contact Signal today for their relentless customer service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And as we continue to navigate to a new normal through this pandemic, Signal is offering COVID fogging, cleaning, and sanitizing services, as well as business resumption planning to help you reopen your doors to a safe and productive workplace for your employees and your customers here in Michigan and around the country. Call Signal today to get your business resumption plan in place. And as we do every week, for those of you that have been impacted by COVID-19, either by losing a family or friend, our thoughts and prayers are with you. We're proud to support and raise proceeds for the Children's Foundation COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund to support essential and frontline workers. We're asking you to make a monetary contribution of any size by texting 2020 IMPACT to 76278. That's texting 2020 IMPACT to 76278. We set a goal of raising $10,000 for the charity throughout the series. We've raised more than $3,000 to date, and certainly appreciate any financial support you're able to give if you're in position to do so. We'll actually update you during the show in real time if you can make a significant contribution. Our first guest today is the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, a group with more than 28,000 members statewide, for a briefing on all things PPP related and their advocacy on behalf of small business for the state of Michigan. I'll take it right now to Brian Calley. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, Derek, thanks for the invitation to be here, and also all the work that you do in convening people and bringing them together, especially in times like now when we're not physically able to get together. It's ironically more important than all that we work together to make good things happen and overcome the type of struggles that we're facing right now. I mean, as you well know, being a small business owner yourself, that small businesses are literally the foundation, the backbone of our economy. And it's not a luxury to have a thriving small business community. It's an absolute necessity for our economy. And so it's important that we don't take anything for granted as we move forward from this point. So there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. First is the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, by now, everybody knows about this, and many business owners have taken advantage of the opportunity to go out there and get 8 weeks of payroll covered. couple things I want to make sure that you're aware of, and also some things that maybe we could use some help in the future on. First is that that documentation is really, really important. You'd know that when you made your application. You had to turn in a lot of documentation, a lot of information, and then when you seek forgiveness afterwards, there's a lot of rules around that. So you're gonna have to be able to show what you paid people and who you paid and how much, and compare it to what they were being paid before. So documentation is going to be really, really key. Now on the advocacy front, there's still additional work that's happening. The rules have come out now, and we know what the rules of the Paycheck Protection Program are. However, they're too strict, and there's real-time ongoing work being done by me and others in our association and others in the business community who are seeking to make a change in the forgiveness period. Right now, you don't have to pay back whatever you use for payroll, rent, utilities, and interest for an 8-week period after the origination of the loan. We think it ought to be longer. Unfortunately, though, we're running out of time before a lot of businesses will be past that first 8-week period, especially if you were in that first round of funding. So in real time, we are working hard at Congress to get this change, to get that 8-week period to be extended all the way out to hopefully about 16 weeks. So in other words, you could get forgiven what you pay on what you use for payroll over a 16-week period instead of just an 8-week period. So this is going to be a really important facet to the overall recovery and helping people with cash flow as they begin to reopen, because as you all well know, that reopening has been a very, very long process here in Michigan. Okay, a couple other things. Reopening requires that every single person have a COVID-19 preparedness and response plan. So if you're green lighted to reopen, then you must have one of these things. And I'm kind of concerned that a lot of business owners don't know about it and therefore don't have it. So I want to encourage you to check out sbam.org, SBAM as in Small Business Association of Michigan, sbam.org. We're going open source with this, okay? So you don't even have to be members, but you ought to be a member if you're not. But anybody can go and get this COVID-19 preparedness and response plan. We have a template, and you can cut and paste and eliminate the parts that don't apply to your industry, but you need to have this plan in your possession to follow, to be compliant as you move forward with reopening. Now, as you get into that plan and you work on mitigation, there's a couple of things that I wanted you to be aware of, some things that are really important with respect to limiting the overall exposure and chances that any kind of infection ends up being sourced or traced back through employment at your facility. So here's the deal on that. You hear a lot in the news about masks, but I want you to think about masks as being your last line of defense. Masks being the last line of defense. It's not the main thing you do, it's the catch-all at the end in order to mitigate risks. So think of it as 4 main pillars of risk mitigation. The first thing, is health screening. Now, I know a lot of business owners are not particularly comfortable with health screening. The idea of asking your employees questions when they come into the office, things like, have you had a fever? Have you been in contact with a person with COVID-19, or this list of symptoms in the last 24 or 48 hours, or whatever your local health department recommends. But health screening is your first line of defense. The best way to keep people in your facility from being infected is to keep infected people out of your facility in the first place. So first line of defense, think of it like a net or a filter. So that first filtration is the health screening, especially for your employees, but depending on your line of business, it might make sense for it to be customers. Later on, when it gets into things like hair salon, I think that'll probably be part of it. They'll ask somebody before they sit down, do you have a fever? But mainly, what we're talking about today is for your employees. So health screening, first line of defense. Second line of defense is distancing. Now, a lot of people think of distancing as just being, hey, everybody's got to keep 6 feet apart. And while 6 feet is the general standard for social distancing, it's better if you actually engineer distancing into your processes in the first place. So in other words, as opposed to saying to your employees, hey, go about your regular job and just really, really try to stay 6 feet apart, that's a lot less likely to be successful than if you engineer distancing into the process in the first place. So it's the idea of setting up your workflow so that distancing is a natural outcome of it, rather than an expectation that your employees just kind of keep in mind and try not to bump into other people, try not to spend time with other people. Just engineer it into your process to the highest extent possible. Okay, so that's the second pillar. First pillar was health screening. Second is engineer distancing into your process. Third pillar of the risk mitigation in your facility is sanitation and disinfecting. Gone are the days of having a janitor come in each night and clean the place up. There are some areas that are just high traffic areas, surfaces that get touched often. It's a mundane thing, but this is actually a really, really effective thing that you can do to protect your employees, to protect your customers, and also protect yourself from the liability of having infections traced back to your facility. So disinfecting, it's the idea of having a regular schedule. You identify those surfaces that people regularly touch, and it's somebody's job to just spray them down and wipe them down several times a day. Just pick your schedule and make it happen regularly. So you get an idea how these things all work together, right? You keep as many sick people out as you can, but that'll never be perfect because some people are asymptomatic. Then you try to keep people separate as much as possible. It's social distancing. You're keeping people apart. And then you're disinfecting those areas where it's just inevitable that multiple people are going to be in those spaces or touching those surfaces. And then the final line of defense, the last pillar in this whole thing, it's personal protective equipment, things like face masks. So what the burden that you're putting on that mask, or that face covering itself. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a hospital mask. The regulations allow for just face coverings. It could be even a bandana, although people don't find a lot of comfort in bandanas. It'd be a good idea if you had something that looks, that would instill confidence in your customers and your employees. And so having the personal protective equipment, hand sanitizer around is a great idea, but then to the extent that people are in close contact with each other, the face coverings or the face masks are that last line of defense. So think about if you're really successful in health screening and you engineer distancing into your process and you sanitize all the surfaces, the job you're putting on that mask at the end of this process is not that big. And that's good because masks aren't perfect and people don't wear them right. You see people all the time with them down below their nose. If you have a mask on and it's below your nose, you might as well not have the mask on. And so that's the idea here, is that you take as much of the chance for error, human error, out of the process by thinking of this as 4 pillars or 4 filters of risk mitigation when it comes to the spread of disease in your facility. Now, here's something else I really want to try and impress upon you as you think about moving forward here. Now, if you're watching this, then you're probably a business owner, right? You probably own a business, which means you are a risk taker. You have the type of profile that taking risks doesn't bother you. How could it? Because you're putting your reputation and your capital, your personal net worth, everything on the line to make this business go. So you are by nature somebody who's used to and willing to take risks. But you can't assume that profile will stand for your employees. And so that's something to really keep in mind in terms of your communication strategies. You're opening back up to really look at this as an important job to win over the confidence of your employees, to go very transparent in your communication of the things that you're doing. Because you might look at this like it's not that big of a deal, but they don't really know what to think. I mean, they've been watching the news and they hear all these different mixed messages. So an assuring and detailed message from you about here are the things that we are doing to make sure that you will be safe in this workplace. That's an important component to any reopening plan. So I just want to encourage you to really look at that robustly. Now, when it comes to the overall advocacy level at the state, naturally, we're advocating to be open. We know that small business owners have the trust of the public. We know they have the trust of their employees. And we should make sure that policymakers recognize and understand that. We've seen polling come out just recently that in terms of the majority of employees, 83% of employees of small businesses say that they trust their employer to provide a safe work environment. So we know, that was just in the Detroit Regional Chamber poll that came out last week. We know that that trust has not been given, it was earned. And the fact that it was earned means that we need our policymakers to recognize that our businesses are up to the challenge. So I want to encourage you to really be a part of this advocacy effort and making good things happen so that we can get this economy back on track. Thank you so much. Derek, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. Once again, we appreciate all the advocacy on behalf of small business in pursuit of the American dream. Once again, we want to remind you we have a goal of raising some financial support for the Children's Foundation. Anything you can do is appreciated by texting 2020 IMPACT to 76278. We'll be right back in just a minute on Impact.
Hi, I'm Oakland County Treasurer Andy Meisner. My office has been helping families and small businesses through tough times for years. If your family or small business is having a tough time, we can assist you now with counseling to help you with your housing situation, personal finances, or credit. And if you're a small business, our counselors can help you apply for grant or loan programs and also help you to rebalance that budget with a little bit less revenue coming in. Give us a call at 248-807-5287 or visit us online at www.oakgov.com/treasurer. Oakland County, we've got your back.
All right, he's a visiting fellow from the American Enterprise Institute, an 82-year-old think tank based in Washington, D.C., promoting the free market and free enterprise system. He works on finding new ways to reskill individuals who have lost their jobs during times of economic disruption, whether because of normal business cycles, automation, artificial intelligence, and COVID-19, especially during a global pandemic. He works with state and city policymakers, investors, and philanthropists implementing opportunity zones and opportunity funds. It's my honor to welcome John Bailey to the program. John, welcome to Impact.
My gosh, it's my honor, especially with that introduction. So
welcome to Impact,
much.
John. I want to start with a quote. Albert,
I just want to talk a little bit about opportunity zones today, give you kind of a quick overview and why it's such a powerful tool, even before COVID, but how I think it's going to be an incredibly important tool as we enter the economic recovery phase of COVID-2. So I'm just going to share my screen and we have a couple slides for it. Great. So opportunity zones, and a couple of ways why I'm so excited about this. First, like in the last 5-6 years, we're seeing a whole emergence of new research by economists like Raj Chetty, that's not here, others like the Economic Innovation Group, that is showing that place matters, that where you grow up in your neighborhood, that place matters as to whether or not you're going to climb up the economic ladder or whether it's going to be more difficult. These persistent poverty traps that are literally neighborhood by neighborhood around the country. And so this is Raj Chetty's Opportunity Atlas that looked at economic mobility. You also have from the Economic Innovation Group something they call the Distressed Communities Index, which looked at 9 or so different types of economic data and housing data and poverty data. What they found is that there are some areas of the country that are showing up here in bright red that are deeply distressed. And you have some areas that are blue that are quite prosperous. But again, what you'll see is a real patchwork across the country of some areas that are really struggling, and some areas that were doing quite well. Now, keep in mind that this was coming after the economic recovery from the last recession, from back in 2008 and 2009. So all these areas that are lighting up red they're getting hit like in a double whammy. Like they were still trying to catch up to their pre-recession levels before the 2008 recession hit. And now all of a sudden they hit the economic shocks created by COVID-19. So what are opportunity zones? Well, it grew out of a policy mechanism to try to address these distressed communities index. And it was an opportunity to take areas that by census tract that are super low income and also struggling. Governors could designate up to 25% of these census tracts to be designated as an opportunity zone. We now have 8,700 of these designations around the country. What we know about them is that this is, again, pre-COVID, is that they tended to be higher poverty. They tended to have higher unemployment rates, including an average of 14.4% unemployment in many of these areas, which is way above the national average. Lower education attainment and also higher minority population. So again, governors did a decent job of designating areas that were deeply distressed and needed help. What we know is that Michigan has close to 288 opportunity zones. And you can see here a map of Michigan that I also put on the screen for you. Like you can literally see down to the neighborhood in Detroit and also in southeastern Michigan as well. That some areas have been designated. What it means is that when you're designated, you qualify for projects to receive investment from a new vehicle called a Qualified Opportunity Fund. And what opportunity funds are is a chance to take the winners coming out of the economic recovery that had a lot of capital gains, unrealized capital gains. They now had an incentive to reinvest those in a Qualified Opportunity Fund and have that Qualified Opportunity Fund reinvested in projects located in those purple areas, in those opportunity zones. Now, that's a pool of potentially $6 trillion that is eligible to be for 3 series of tax benefits for investment in these areas. Now, what are the 3 incentives? Well, first is that as an investor, they can defer paying their capital gains tax for 10 years, so going all the way up to 2026. They get to reduce their tax liability on those funds by up to 15%, as long as those funds stay in a project for up to 7 years. Now, here's the real carrot for these investors, that if they invest in a project in an opportunity zone, they keep it there for at least 10 years, so very patient capital. If they keep it there for at least 10 years, all the gains generated by that investment are essentially capital gains tax-free. So what this does is it creates incentive to, again, take dollars off the sideline from the capital gains market, reinvest it in low-income and struggling neighborhoods, and then encourages it to be there patient for at least 10 years so that projects have a chance to take hold. Now, what are the different types of projects that a Qualified Opportunity Fund could support? Well, it's anything that can take an equity investment. This could be real estate, it could be opening up new businesses, it could be also acquiring existing businesses and relocating it into an opportunity zone, it could be growing businesses. But what most people are focused on, because the rules were the clearest, was around the real estate aspect of this. But we just got Treasury final regs in December, and it provided a lot of clarity for how you can invest this in businesses and small businesses. And we think it's going to unleash a whole swath of entrepreneurship, not just in sort of tech and innovation, but also in just very Main Street businesses, hardware stores, dry cleaners, things that you need to make a community thrive and to grow over time. And so, chance to invest there. Now, what have we seen in recent months? Final regulations came out in December, which is just gives all the regulatory certainty now that a lot of investors needed. And what you can see is that at least $10 billion has been committed. And you can see from the chart there that as soon as those final regulations came up in December, that there was just a huge growth. And so we have at least $10 billion. That number is likely to continue growing, even during COVID here, as investors look for a place to park some of their investment, but also as a way of investing this in the communities that are struggling. We also expect the administration, as well as Congress, as part of upcoming fiscal relief projects, to leverage opportunity zones, both the current designations, potentially even to give the chance to expand designations to also help communities that have just been hit so hard by COVID-19, particularly on the economic side, and the challenges this has created for small businesses to help them with their restart and recovery efforts. So I will stop sharing the screen and just thank you for the chance to talk with you all today.
And Albert Einstein once said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. Where do you think the greatest opportunities are for small business owners in America today? John? John, Albert Einstein once said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. Where do you think the opportunity is for small business owners today?
Well, I think there's always going to be opportunity coming out of crisis. I know it is super challenging for small businesses right now, and I've just been amazed at watching small businesses coming out of past crises. And I almost guarantee that we will see that here. Steve Case, who's done this amazing sort of tour over the last couple of years of Rise and the Rest, has shown that there's entrepreneurial talent everywhere in the country. What they mostly have lacked is access to capital. Most venture capital goes to 3 cities, pretty much California and San Francisco area, Boston and New York. Opportunity zones get a chance to do venture capital for new small businesses. Same thing with lending. It was like very difficult, as we were just hearing with the Paycheck Protection Program, for many small businesses to get access to loans. And this opportunity zones are going to create another vehicle in which to get some equity financing as well. So I think this is going to be a great tool for Michigan. The best part about it is that all the creativity goes to the small businesses. That if they're located in an opportunity zone, it's up to them whether or not they want to accept opportunity fund investments or not, but it gives them access to new capital flow for the part of their capital stack.
John, I'd like to ask, can you talk a little bit more about access to capital for small business owners? You know, a lot of them are struggling, dealing with some very pressing issues, not knowing where money's coming from. Some of them have applied for the PPP. Some of them are in the loan forgiveness process. Throughout all this, what sort of advice or what advice do you have for those small business owners that are looking for capital injection today from the government?
Gosh, it's so important. I mean, we had a somewhat broken capital market for small businesses even before COVID. And I think COVID, as it has done in so many different ways, has shown a bright spotlight on so many inequities. And part of this is what it's shown is the challenge small businesses have getting access to different types of credit, to different types of capital infusion. So my advice would be don't give up. That there's still roughly about 100 billion, give or take, in the current round of Paycheck Protection Program. And so continue working with your lenders. If you need other lenders, look to organizations like LISC and other community financing institutions. Don't give up and keep trying. I do expect that when Congress does pass an additional round fiscal relief, which what we're hearing right now is probably not likely until the end of June, beginning of July, but that will have increased dollars for the Paycheck Protection Program. Hopefully some of the needed fixes that we just heard about in your first segment as well. And so there's a lot of folks that are arguing for that and advocating for it, and we're relatively optimistic that we'll get some fixes there. But second, again, if you're in one of these opportunity zone areas, look to see whether or not you can access some additional dollars this way. And then finally, take a look at some of the various types of community finance development institutions that have been set up around the country. Many of them are offering bridge loans and other types of financing, recognizing the emergency that we're facing, that small businesses are facing, that nonprofits are facing. Many of these have good terms, and it's meant to sort of bridge to kind of get over past all of the challenges created by the government shutdowns and get us into the area for recovery.
John, I've got time for one more question. It's from Brian from Farmington Hills. He's asking what incentive his employees have to come back to work when they're making nearly double staying home, collecting stimulus and unemployment. I'm sure it's a question a lot of small business owners have. Please help us understand.
No, it's become a big dividing line up in Congress, and I think you're going to see this is part of the debate going in to the next round of phase 4. economic relief. You've seen Senator McConnell and others say that they don't want to have the unemployment insurance be so generous that it's rewarding people for not going to work, and instead create financial incentives to reward people for going to work to help in that situation that your caller just described. And so, again, we're sort of dependent on Congress coming up with a fix on this. We've seen some of the starting positions, including from Senator McConnell and Republicans, but also the White House, who said that they want to make sure that all the incentives are to get people back to work and not create an incentive for people not to work. So hopefully we'll be able to get that fixed as part of this next package.
And just one final follow-up. What is your sense on when we'll get back to some kind of normalcy as you and I remember it?
Gosh, it's a great question. I had the great privilege back in 2005 of working on the first pandemic preparedness plan with Dr. Tony Fauci when I was at the Department of Commerce. We were working with small businesses then. I think we are starting to get back to a new normal, and that new normal is going to be with a lot of these different types of public health accommodations and with a lot of the different types of things we heard at the beginning of the program with lots of deep cleaning and hygiene and masks. I think, unfortunately, that is our new normal for at least another 12 months. And that is just based on what Tony Fauci and others, public health officials, have said. We won't get back to the normal that we left until there's a vaccine. And a vaccine, unfortunately, even though we've seen some promising developments last week, is still probably 12 to 18 months away. So I think everyone wants us to get back to normal as soon as possible. But the reality that I think we have to face and prepare for is at least 12 more months of some of the changes in the protocols that we're embracing right now.
John, we appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your analysis. I wish you and your family continued health and safety during the crisis, and appreciate all you do at American Enterprise Institute to promote the free market, free enterprise system. Thank you so very much. We'll see you soon. All right, we'll take a quick break, and once again, we'll want to remind you about our Text to Donate campaign, 2020 Impact to 76278. Appreciate all you can do. We'll be back in just a minute on Impact.
Across America, business owners are figuring things out, finding new ways to serve customers, connect employees, and work with partners. Comcast Business is right there with you, with a network that helps give you speed, reliability, and security, and enough bandwidth to handle all your connected devices. Voice solutions like remote call forwarding and readable voicemail, and safe installation. When every connection counts, you can count on us. Get started with connectivity your business needs, or ask about other offers to get a prepaid card worth up to $500.
As AT&T's #1 partner, MMS prides itself on delivering a world-class experience to our clients and our communities to keep them connected where they live, work, and play. During these challenging times, we are here to serve you. We have many options to keep you connected to your loved ones by offering non-contact transactions and curbside service. Also, because we care about our healthcare professionals, we are offering 3 months of free service to doctors and nurses. Visit mmsmobile.com/stores to find an open location near you and call ahead to set up a curbside appointment.
Welcome back. Once again, we encourage you to add questions into our chat box, and just want to encourage you to be a part of the conversation. In a memorable quote, Michael Ventura said, "There is no finish line. There are only mile markers." It's time to find out what mile marker we're on with our esteemed panel. Let's start with Laura Claeys, who's a partner at Plante Moran and has been so for more than 30 years, where she provides financial statement tax and business advice to real estate construction and K-12 clients. Laura is also a member of the American Institute of CPAs and the Michigan Association of CPAs. Good morning, Laura. Good afternoon, Laura. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we wanted to add a small business owner that's been vocal about the PPP and about restarting our state. Chef Bobby Nahra founded Encore Catering and Banquets more than 22 years ago, serves as the president. He's also regularly seen on local channels. He's a celebrity chef. He's also partnered with Maria Sharapova in her new chocolate line, which is called Sugar Pova. He's also a partner at Freedom Hill Amphitheater in Macomb County and anxious to get back to business. Let's welcome Chef Bobby Nahra as well. Good morning, Chef. Good afternoon, Chef.
Good afternoon, Laura. Good afternoon,
Sure. Good morning. All right, so let's start with Laura. Most companies now have their PPP loans in place, and they've been funded. So loan forgiveness is now top of mind. What has been the most frequently asked question for borrowers from your vantage point that are trying to put themselves in the best position to have their loans forgiven?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few questions that are out there because the government moved very quickly to put the loans in place, and that was to get money in the hands of the people that they felt needed it. But now there's a lot of questions coming about. The biggest ones relate to payroll and what type of payroll counts. For example, can you include bonuses in your payroll costs, which they've now clarified that you can? Can you include hazard pay if you're paying employees to come in what they might deem to be an unsafe environment, even though it is safe? Yes, you can include that type of stuff. And what does insurance mean? And right now that means medical insurance, not workers' comp, not dental, not vision. And then what does retirement mean? Pension, profit sharing, 401k costs. There are a lot of questions about payroll. What does utilities mean? And those non-payroll costs, as well as rent. And the biggest question really relates to some of the comments that were made earlier and counting of FTEs, particularly in an environment where you had all of your employees perhaps laid off or furloughed, and you're having a tough time restarting your business and getting them back on the payroll. And you only have 8 weeks to spend those dollars in order for them to be eligible for forgiveness. So making all of that math work to put yourself in the best position for forgiveness has really driven the majority of questions as well as frustration. I realize it's complicated. We don't have all the answers, but we are certainly trying to interpret the law as written and then generate as many questions and clarifications as we can.
I want to ask a follow-up question to you, Laura. What happens to organizations that use their 2019 wage information to obtain the PPP loan, but have been unable to hire people back due to the complete shutdown of their respective
I'll jump
industry?
in here. Hopefully you can hear me. You cut out on your question, but I think it was you really used your 2019 information in order to apply for the loan, and you got that based on 2.5 months worth of payroll data. And now you're in an 8-week period where you're trying to hire people back and maybe struggling, as I mentioned. So if you're not able to spend all of those funds and you end up not having all of your loan forgiveness, do you have to pay it all back immediately? And the answer to that is no. What would happen is once you're notified of how much of your loan is or is not forgiven, the balance that is not forgiven becomes a 2-year term note payable with 1% interest. And I think most people would agree, regardless of the size of the business, 1% money is something that you normally cannot get from a traditional lender. So it may provide some much needed financing for businesses at this point in time.
And is it true that if employers don't use 75% of the loan on payroll costs, that none of it will be forgiven? Can you hear me? How about now? No? How about now? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay. So is it true that if employers don't spend 75% of the loan on payroll costs, that none of it will be forgiven?
No, that's a misconception. I do understand why people thought that initially. So what the SBA has said is if you don't spend 75% of that loan on payroll, it will reduce the amount that's forgiven. And then as I stated before, it just turns into that term note with 1% interest.
When will the businesses know if their loans have been forgiven?
Interesting question. So the way that the law is written is once you reach the end of the 8-week period, you are allowed to apply to your lender for forgiveness, and you do have to apply. It's not an automatic. And once you fill out the application, as well as provide all of the supporting documentation, the lender has 60 days in order to review that information. Then what the lender does is they let the SBA, Small Business Administration, know that this loan is being forgiven, and they request reimbursement from the SBA because the lender is the one who gave you the money. And the SBA has 90 days to agree or disagree with the lender. So without further clarification at the moment, it could take about 150 days before a business knows whether or not their full loan was forgiven or how much is now turned into a term note.
Chef Bobby, I'd like to bring you in and ask you a couple questions. First and foremost, I want to start off by asking, I mean, I got some fun questions to ask you, but what's it like to team up with international sensation Maria Sharapova? Looks like Chef is muted.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, Maria's a hard worker. She works just as hard as any middle-class person that's trying to be successful. With her level of success, I think she gets like $38 million a year just in revenue from, sponsors. And to be able to work with her was pretty phenomenal because she'd get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, train, work out, and make it to breakfast at 7:30 and work till 11, 12 o'clock at night from her product and all day. Boom, the next day, right at it again. And you kind of have to. A beautiful woman like that, you got to kind of keep your distance. So I was very bashful around her, and that worked for me. So, but yeah.
Chef, I think you'll agree that being a small business owner is somebody that innately has a positive winning attitude. You're the vision for your company. You're the leader. It's all about being optimistic. And that's what built this country, right? So let's talk. The Small Business Association of Michigan recently had a study where 1 in 7 business owners do not feel confident their businesses will survive the lockdown, even with access to PPP money and other capital, as John mentioned earlier. What are the long-term consequences of keeping small business closed in this state?
Well, it's real simple. How do we get our staff back to work? I mean, we've been closed. We're going to be 90 days pretty soon, mid-June. They're making more money at home, sitting home. Our average person only makes $18 an hour. I think they're getting paid $24 an hour to stay home. Staying shut down, we lose our audience, lose our ability to sustain a comfort level with people, the trust of our brand. So, we have a third of the people that can't wait to get back. My phone's ringing off the hook. I have a lady that her event's June 7th. She's like, I want my daughter showered that day. I don't care if we're breaking the law. I'm like, look, I can't lose my license and my livelihood over a couple $1,000 shower. I appreciate you trusting me with that. I think our PPP rules are very unrealistic for businesses that are 95 or 100% shut down. When we do get some business, Derek, you see me, feeding hospitals and frontline workers. That's been great. I've had some very generous donations with some philanthropists and some local business people, such as Larry Burns gave us a huge grant to feed Brilliant Detroit and a couple other shelters in our area. And so it brought my culinary team back to work, but I had to give them hazard pay. I had to pay them overtime because I couldn't get enough out of, instead of getting 14 guys back, I got 6 guys back in the kitchen. So my back office was at 50%. My front office is completely gone. I don't have any waitresses, no waiters, no bartenders, no hostesses, no cut check girl, no valet. So how do I entice those people to come back to work? And what I'm supposed to do, dust the wine bottles off for, 6-8 hours a day. So my biggest struggle is no one is leading us through this. What does post-COVID look like for our industry? I talked to Jonathan Witz today for an hour. He's an outdoor guy. He does massive events for 100,000 people. What does his business look like post-COVID? It's hard to even imagine that, Derek. It's our business is physical work. You're around, hundreds of people at a time. The key to my business is a private event. Okay. Our events are private. So it's invite only. We're not open to the public. You don't have wedding crashers coming in off the street. Hey, come on in. Know everybody on the list. So there's a period of issues with our COVID, protocols and the PPP money. It's been very stressful. There's no one establishing a definitive finish line of, where we need to be,
And so what are the major challenges from your vantage point as a small business owner accessing PPP and the loan forgiveness process?
Where to put the money and how to make sure it's forgiven. We were supposed to be closed 2 weeks. Now it's 8 weeks. Like I said earlier, it's going to be probably 12 weeks. I want to make sure the people that are here are working and they're getting paid for their work. how do I get people to come back to work if I have no work for them to do? That's my biggest question. You know, somebody please tell me when we're going to open up, and if they extend the, you know, the 8 weeks to 24 weeks, like the, you know, the administration is considering, then let us know. It's, you know, we're trying to establish a burn rate, but every week it changes. You know, the administration in Lansing, you talk to, you know, Kevin Hertel, you talk to Peter Lucido, nobody knows what's going on. We don't, everything's like arbitrary. You know, why is it 6 feet? Why is it 10 feet? So the documentation, the rules are unrealistic. The first round of funding is up soon. We were one of the first companies to get it. So what do I do with it? I'm still not open. I still can't bring 100% of my employees back. And if I could, it's going to be hard to get back. So maybe somebody on the panel can help me figure this out, because that's my biggest challenge is when am I going to reopen, and how can I use that PPP money properly and get it forgiven? That's my question. Because not being open, I'm only open like 5% of my revenue right now.
So let's ask Laura. Laura, this is Chef Bobby is a small business owner. He's involved in many businesses throughout the state. You're obviously sensing and hearing a lot of his frustrations. He's echoing the same sentiments from colleagues and friends of his in a variety of businesses. What advice do you have for the small business owner going through these frustrations right now?
One, I empathize and I understand, and there are no easy answers because, to his point, you don't know when you're going to reopen. So, when do you start calling people back? When can you get your business up and running? So, the original intent of this Paycheck Protection Program was for business owners to be able to keep their employees on the payroll. So, when your business is shut down and there isn't any work for them to do, you're faced with two options. One, don't pay them at all and have them go on unemployment. And I'll come back to that in a second. Or two, continue to pay them at their standard hourly rate or their wage while you know that they are sitting at home, perhaps unable to do anything associated with your business because that's not how your business operates. And so if you take that path and you say, I'm not going to pay people to sit at home and do nothing, they'll go on unemployment. You don't have any payroll necessarily that you're able to report as being spent in that 8-week time frame. And so what will happen is those PPP funds that you received, the bulk of them may end up not being forgiven, which is why groups such as Small Business Administration of Michigan, as well as the AICPA and others, are pushing so hard to have that spend period expanded. Because while we in Michigan have been hit very hard and closed down very hard, and other communities and states have had similar situations, some of them have not experienced it to this severity that we have here in Southeast Michigan. So they're trying to write rules and regulations to fit everyone, and we've been experiencing something much more difficult. So it could be that a chunk of that loan will not be forgiven. And that is very unfortunate because I don't believe that was the intent of the plan. So what's been lobbied for is expansion of the pay periods, which I understand what Chef is saying. He's running out of time. So if you're going to change the rules, change them now and let me know what they are. And the other piece is also lobbying to get that 75% lift off of payroll, and maybe allow a business like this, where some of it has been closed, more of it can be spent on rent, utilities, interest, those things that kept you in your facility, even though you weren't able to have people in it and run your business. No easy answers. I know that. We keep pushing hard to get the rules clarified and relaxed. And then you have business decisions to make about getting people back on the payroll, even if they may not be working for you.
Laura, I'd like to follow that up with a question from Lance Cousins. What's the role of the SBA and how is it working in the interest of small business during the pandemic and a crisis in order to advise the state to level the playing field in terms of reopening?
Great question. I don't know the politics behind all of that. I mean, clearly they have been overwhelmed with this program and the expansion of it and the size of it because they're used to issuing much smaller loans under the regular small business program. I do know each and every state is working with those organizations to provide input, but then they've legislatively got to work through the politics of changing rules and regulations, some of which have nothing to do with Small Business Administration, loan programs, and things like that. It really relates to public safety, which is other departmental areas within the government. So they have a voice. How strong that voice is and how it gets to impact policy, I'm not really in a position to speak on that topic.
Laura, one more follow-up question, and then Chef Bobby, I'll
Sure.
come to you because I know you're dealing with this situation. Bobby, the chef mentioned it earlier, and so did John, address it about what advice do you give for small business owners that have employees? What incentive do they have to come back to work if they're making more money sitting at home? How do we solve this problem in America today?
Well, two things that you could consider doing. So clearly, when employers are looking at that relative to their ability to get debt forgiveness, there have been clarities put in those rules that say if you've made a written offer of employment for someone to come back, they've said that they don't want to come back because they're making more on unemployment. That doesn't have to be their reason, but they refuse the offer to come back. If you document that, you have it in writing, can be an email or a letter, and then you as the employer make the unemployment agency aware of that within 30 days, then when you're doing all the mathematics as to do you have the same number of full-time equivalents today as you did prior to COVID-19, those people will not harm you in your mathematics of getting forgiveness. That's great, but you still need to get people back to work, right? The other thing that you can do is if you said, I really need those people to come back to work right now, and I do have the funds available from the PPP program, you may consider giving them some additional incentive pay to come back on the payroll. Perhaps it's equal to what they were making on unemployment, but it gets them back in the building and gets their skills back to you so you aren't retraining a new element of the workforce. Neither one, again, very good solutions, but they are options.
Bobby, any one of those options satisfactory to you?
Well, my biggest issue right now is people are hip to what they can get away with. Not to be negative, but I have staff sends me doctor's notes saying that they're compromised, not come back. So I'm forced to train them, and we get a finish line of June. I have to pay someone to train. Our road to open and unenviable. Rebuilding our business. We don't have no one helping us mitigate losses and damages. So many of us in life. So that being said, most people have a way to sit home. They're content to stay, especially people in my industry. It's not way. I appreciate a lot, her expertise in this field, but you're dealing with people that sometimes are very transient and they're looking for the easy way out. Hard work doesn't always pay off for these people. So it's a dark COVID area.
Laura, what do you have to say to Chef Bobby on that?
I understand, and I understand the frustration. I don't know enough about your business to say, could you argue that you are a seasonal employer rather than, I'll say, a full-time employer to provide other options for forgiveness? We have the same situation come up, by the way, for some of our clients that are working in the construction field, where maybe it's unionized work and people come and go off job sites. And what do you do when you need people back on job sites and they're in the same boat making more on unemployment than they would make necessarily in the field? So this is not a challenge necessarily unique to the restaurant industry and hospitality space, but no doubt at all that this has been the hardest hit. And I'd love to see changes in the rules that would allow you to spend some of those costs also on the added cost related to cleaning and social distancing and all of the things that you're going to need to do in order to open. Those take costs and time and energy and effort as well. And those are not addressed in these loan programs, but perhaps should be.
Chef Bobby, I know the PPE a part of your business. Cleanliness has always been number one, first and foremost to you. I see the way that you operate your events. Everything is done first class. This added expense that Laura talked about, I mean, right now you just have to, will you forward that to your customer? What does that look like in the future?
Well, hopefully I'll have customers in the future open. During our shutdown, we're going to a touchless system. So we have invested several $1,000s in each bathroom to make everything touchless. The soap dispenser, the paper towel dispenser, the water faucets, the toilet flushing mechanisms, hooks on the doors, so you can easily, access the stalls. So that would be great, Laura. If we could do that, that would be outstanding to get compensated or some sort of reimbursement to make our businesses more COVID-19 friendly for people to have a little more confidence in our buildings. I know a lot of people. My friend that owns Gilbert's has gone, over and above with his business practices moving forward. He's ready to open. My 3 locations are ready to open. I think that our businesses are already hospital clean from the back of the house. Just go to work on the back door. They're constantly checking the bathrooms every hour on the hour. I even thought about bringing a nurse's practitioner or a nurse's aide or a certified healthcare professional to come in and take temperatures of people on the way into my building and document their names and have a paper trail that way. I'm happy to do that. I mean, we kick our shoes off at the airport, take our belts off. Why not take a temperature when you're going to a party for 150, 200 people? I'm happy to shoulder the expense of that. I would not think in years to add that expense to my clients. I would shoulder that expense for the safety of my business. And
Laura, let me ask, would a business be able to get that loan forgiven if they're hiring a nurse practitioner to take the temperature of customers that are coming in? Would that be included in the PPP forgiveness?
Yeah, so the law itself doesn't distinguish between what are individuals doing. So if they're an employee, so it's got to be an employee, and you're making a payroll payment to them within the period of time that you've gotten the loan proceeds, so that 8-week period we're dealing with right now, absolutely it would count. If you're hiring that person as a vendor or contractor, independent contractor, those types of things, then it doesn't count. So it would be very important to make them an employee, even if it's a short-term employee, and then you would be able to include those costs.
Chef, I think we found a workaround for you there. I want to add, I'll have to introduce you to after this. I do want to ask Laura, if you were giving advice to a small business owner today, what would you tell them about the PPP forgiveness process in whole? Let's say they have not applied yet. They've been putting out fires for the last 2.5 months. There's $100 billion left in the program. What advice would you give them today?
Well, I think if they've not applied for the PPP loan and they feel that they're qualified for it, they should absolutely apply for it. The money's still there, they're entitled to it, and they may as well get it. And then their 8-week period of spending starts when they get the loan. So go ahead and get that. And then for those individual business owners that have the loan and now are watching the clock tick away on this 8-week period of time, as was stated earlier, keep all your documentation. How are you spending that money? Keep track of those things that we're not quite sure yet whether they might qualify. So some of these ancillary insurance benefits, maybe some of the costs for cleaning and safety, those haven't even been addressed in the law. But I think as more and more people are becoming aware that less and less of these loans will be forgiven, I think that's where we're going to see a tremendous amount of energy put forth on trying to loosen up the regulations. Similar to when the loans were issued, there was over 40 clarifications issued even after people had the money. I expect a lot more clarifications coming as more and more people are creeping close to requesting forgiveness.
Appreciate that. Chef Bobby, words of advice to our governor. What do you say?
Well, first I want to throw it back to Laura for a second. Payroll taxes. God, we're getting crushed on payroll taxes. Push the button on payroll, and more than a third of it goes back to the government. During these, unprecedented times, you think they would cut us slack, on our payroll taxes. It's not happening. Do you have any advice for me on that?
Yeah, so the one element that they did have out there for employers is the employer Social Security tax that you pay on your employee wages, so the 6.2% that you pay on their wages, you are allowed to defer that. And all you have to do is not pay it into the government. And so you're allowed to defer that up until the point in time that a portion of your loan is forgiven. And if nothing's forgiven, you can do it all the way up to December 31st, 2020. And whatever that dollar amount is, you are then allowed to pay that into the government 50% by December of 21 and 50% by December of 22. So it gives you another short-term financing piece. What
you.
you can't do is the wages, the withholding you have from employee wages, you can't hang on to that. You've got to send that in.
Send in the check, Chef. Chef, any final words of advice for our governor?
Governor, help us help you. Let us come to the table. I'm happy to work with your administration. I represent 30 to 40 catering halls and hundreds of chefs here locally in the metropolitan Detroit area. I would love to be the chef that helps us cross the finish line and get open. We want to get open. Government grants and loans and PPP and all that stuff's great. But guys like me, it's extremely depressing not to be able to go to work and earn a living for my family and do what I love to do. I'm passionate about what I do. I love creating food with my hands and walking out into a dining room. There's 300 people eating a beautiful dinner at their daughter or their son's wedding, and they're making history together. So that being said, I know you will help out. I know a lot on your table, but I'm begging you, let us get open mid-June. That would be phenomenal. We got a lot of people. We have 11 million people in our industry that are out of work. That's a third of unemployment in the United States. Our unemployment's ridiculous in Michigan. We need your help to get these people back to work and get our businesses running so we can stimulate some sales tax and some liquor tax and, the way it's supposed to work. That's all.
The way it's supposed to work. That's the American dream. Hard work, entrepreneurship, and sacrifice. And no one exudes that more than you, Chef. I certainly appreciate your wisdom and leadership on behalf of small business. Thank you for being our representative this morning. And Laura Claeys from Plante Moran, appreciate your expertise and your background. If anybody would like Laura's contact information, just send me an email. I'll be more than happy to make an introduction. Want to wish both of you and your families all the health and safety. We hope to see you soon in person. And in closing, I do want to remind you that we're sensitive to all the lives that have been lost to COVID-19 and certainly would appreciate your support of our attempt to support the Children's Foundation COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund. And to that end, we are promoting a text to donate campaign. It's texting 2020 impact to 76278. Any dollar amount you can do would be fantastic to support frontline and essential workers. Help us make a difference while making an impact. We hope you enjoyed today's program and appreciate if you'd like to invite a friend or colleague to next week as we focus on all things related to the impact of COVID-19 and residential real estate. You can catch this and all of our programs on our YouTube channel. We invite you to subscribe today, get involved in the conversation, and join us for next week. Once again, special thanks to Signal Restoration Services, our title sponsor for today. Appreciate all the support of our sponsors. And once again, want to remind you to stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you soon on Impact.
You created it. You believe in it. A brand dedicated to excellence and destined for growth. It's a dream that propels you, that colors every step you take, that looms large and steers you towards success. Your vision sparks passion, exudes luxury. Now is the moment to draw them in, to become what they covet, to navigate to that next level, to rise above and reach beyond, to set a course that exceeds even your own expectations, to leave the competition in your wake. Now is your moment to be the brand everyone believes in.